In my previous life, Grace and I were classmates who went to the countryside. We went together as young intellectuals. When we realized there was no hope of returning to the city, we decided to get married there. But at that time there were only 2 marriageable men. Grace chose to marry Jake, a miner, so she could live comfortably. She could avoid struggling to earn labor credits, while I married a widower named Robert. Unexpectedly, not long after the mine was shut down, Jake lost his job and his temperament became unstable. He eventually turned into a violent man who abused his family. Meanwhile, my husband turned out to be a soldier. Our marriage was incredibly happy. Out of jealousy, Grace invited me out and pushed me off a cliff. When I lived again, she chose the man who had been my husband. She told me this time I had to let her enjoy the blessings. But she didn't know everything I had was earned through sweat, pain, and hardship. Lily, that man is a miner and he definitely has money. If you marry him, you won't have to work yourself to exhaustion earning labor credits. She said, seeing that Grace's choice was completely different. I instantly understood both of us had been reborn. We had returned to the exact day the matchmaker came to arrange our marriages. We were making the same decision all over again. The pain from the fall that had shattered my body was gone. Grace was still trying her best to persuade me. Lily, the matchmaker, said the miner has liked you for a long time. If you marry him, your life will be much more comfortable. I blinked my big round eyes at her and asked, but what about you? Do you really want to marry the widower? You're such a young woman. These words sounded like concern, but in truth I was only trying to confirm. She sighed, what choice do I have? There are only those 2 men. We're women, don't we still have to rely on men? Lily, as long as you're happy, I'm happy. I sneered inside. She really knew how to act like she cared. If in our previous life she hadn't pushed me off that cliff, maybe I would have believed her. The matchmaker grew impatient. So have you 2 decided? Grace answered immediately, we have. Lily will marry the miner and I'll take the other man. Her eyes could not hide her smugness. I lowered my gaze. She really believes marrying that man will bring her happiness. His situation is nowhere near as simple as the matchmaker claims. In our previous life, Grace and I were both best friends and classmates. After graduating high school, we went to the countryside with others to work. Over time, we gradually realized the hope of returning to the city was slim. That was when people began arranging marriages for us, 1 widower and 1 miner. In our previous life, Grace chose the miner first, leaving the widower to me. But her comfortable life didn't last long. Soon the mine shut down. Jake completely collapsed. He was drunk every day and would beat her mercilessly, making her life worse than death. The man I married turned out to be a soldier. He always loved and protected me. When we were old, Grace came to the city and met me. She invited me for a walk. We had been close like sisters. I didn't suspect anything, but at the cliff she suddenly shoved me hard. Her eyes filled with malice. Why do you get to live so happily? I can't accept it. But she also lost her balance and fell with me. The 2 of us died together at the bottom of that cliff. But in this life, as I watched her make a different choice from before, I let out a cold laugh in my heart. All the suffering I'd endured in my past life, let's see whether she can withstand it this time. That day, Grace and I were both married off. The miner's family brought lots of pork. The bride price was extremely generous. I wore a brand new red wedding dress. Meanwhile, Grace's side was extremely simple with almost no proper bride price. She wore a faded set of clothes with a single red flower on her chest. Her eyes kept drifting toward my wedding gifts. Jealousy twisted her expressions. Before we came to the countryside, Grace had loved dressing up the most. She always chased the newest fashion trends, but now she had nothing. Her husband's family lived far. It would take them a while to pick her up. Jake arrived first and took me away. Before leaving, I stopped by her room. She looked at me and said, Lily, I don't believe in fate. I've always believed that in this life I'm destined to be wealthy and live in comfort. I smiled at her. Grace, having ambition is good, even the party teaches us. But she suddenly let out a mocking laugh. Lily, you're still so naive. I ignored her and turned to follow Jake out. He had prepared carefully for the wedding. Along the way, many villagers gathered to watch the excitement. Even when I stepped into his house, everything still felt like a dream. But I had truly been reborn this time. I no longer had to wake before dawn. I finally got a good night's sleep. The next morning, the smell of food was spreading. I went to the kitchen and saw Jake busy cooking. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. You're awake, go wash your face and come eat breakfast. I felt a little embarrassed. After all, the mindset was still very traditional. People believed women should stay home, give birth, take care of the family, wash clothes, cook meals, and that as long as their husbands didn't cheat, they were considered good men. In my past life, my mother-in-law drilled those ideas into me constantly. Even the neighbors said marrying a soldier was the greatest blessing a woman could have. It wasn't until later when I moved to the city that I saw women building careers. But at the dining table, Jake actually looked a bit embarrassed. He kept picking food. "If you want to come help me at the mine, you can. If you don't want to, just tell me. I can help you find another job." Seeing how honest he was, I couldn't resist teasing him. "Then what if I just want to stay home and sleep?" He froze, not expecting that. But he simply gave me a gentle smile. "A wife is someone to cherish. Whatever you want to do is fine. The matchmaker said you were hardworking. I was worried you might get bored." I burst out laughing. "I'm not staying home. I'll find something to do myself." He smiled too, his eyes curving like a crescent moon. After breakfast, Jake took my hand. Several large trunks were stacked. Jake opened the bottom one and took out a red bundle. Layer after layer, he unwrapped it, revealing thousands of banknotes. Inside, the denominations weren't large, but they were arranged neatly. I froze on the spot. I never expected so much money. Grace had given up such a wealthy man to me. Jake handed the entire sum to me. He scratched his head. "I was supposed to give this to you last night, but today isn't too late. This is all the money I've saved. I'm giving it all to you to manage." Even though I had lived 2 lifetimes, I was still deeply moved at that moment. This was the trust he placed in me, something I had never received in my past life. In Robert's household, I had been treated with suspicion. His whole family were ungrateful wolves. I accepted the money and told him seriously, "Don't worry, I'll manage it carefully. I won't waste a single cent." Before I even finished speaking, Jake burst into laughter. "What do you think men earn money for? Isn't it for their wives to spend? I saved all this because I didn't have a wife. Now that you're married, just spend freely. I work in a mine. What would I even spend money on?" Hearing his words, I made a silent vow in this life I would never let him fall into ruin. After a day of living together, I realized Jake was honest and hardworking. He didn't seem like the kind of man who would raise a hand against his wife. Suddenly, I remembered the scene from my past life when Grace came to brag to me. She wore a beautiful floral dress, her hair tied into 2 bouncing braids, cheerfully telling me, "Lily, my life is amazing now. I eat well, dress well. Every week I go into the city with Jake to buy clothes. But Jake is way too wasteful when he treats his friends to meals. He insists on expensive restaurants." Not long after that, she came crying to me, complaining miserably. She said Jake's friends saw the difficult situation, but none were willing to help. In this life, I absolutely would not make the same mistake as Grace. Happiness is something you create for yourself. If I had to say one thing, it would be this. A few days later, Jake took me to the market fair. In the crowd, I spotted Grace. Her face was tired and worn out as she dragged 3 children behind her. Wherever the kids saw something they wanted, they demanded it, whining and crying non-stop. She gripped a few small bills tightly in her hand, her eyes lingering longingly at the clothing stall. Yet she couldn't bring herself to buy anything for herself. At the same time, she refused for the children. The result was that the kids burst into tears, screaming in the middle of the street, "You evil stepmother, you won't buy anything for us." People passing by all stopped to look. Grace, who had always cared about her pride, suddenly lost all face. She had no choice but to buy something. Standing in the crowd, I watched the scene unfold before me, feeling like I was witnessing a different world. In my past life, after marrying the divorced man, I learned that despite him being a soldier, remarrying was not easy. That was because he had 3 young children. Their grandmother was afraid if the new daughter-in-law gave birth, she set a rule: the woman was not allowed to have children of her own. Only when she saw her son remain alone did she finally grow anxious. They discussed with the matchmaker. I was married into that family without the slightest idea about their bizarre family rules. Only after the wedding did they lay out their conditions right in front of me. In my previous life, not only did I never have a child of my own, but I devoted myself to raising my husband's 3 children. I taught them and helped them get into college. But who could have predicted they would be just like their father, an ungrateful bunch? At their college celebration banquet, they publicly announced, "A stepmother like you doesn't deserve to stand on stage. We only thank our real mother for giving birth to us." I knew it well. Their ingratitude didn't stop there. When I grew old and fell seriously ill, I could have survived with timely treatment, but what did they do? One after another, they came forward accusing me, saying I wasn't worthy, saying I should just die. In that moment, my heart froze to the core. "Lily, what are you looking at?" Jake's voice pulled me back. I lowered my head, smoothing my hair as I smiled. "Nothing, just watching the crowd. Let's go home." When I lifted my head again, I caught Grace's gaze through the sea of people. She was staring straight at me. Jake went off to buy some things and told me to wait in place. Not long after that, Grace appeared before me. Her expression dark and stormy. The 3 children were no longer following her. She spoke first, her voice full of blame. "Lily, you didn't tell me Andrew Lee's 3 kids were this wild and unruly. Why didn't you warn me beforehand? And his mother, she's so old yet hasn't died. She's fierce like a tiger. Why didn't you say anything?" Every word out of her mouth was an accusation. and Andrew Lee, that was the name of the soldier. I pretended not to understand. What are you talking about? In my previous life I moved into the city. So Grace had never truly known what my former husband's household was like. I widened my eyes, acting surprised. Those 3 kids are his children. Didn't the matchmaker say he was just a widower? Why are there suddenly 3 children? Grace stared at my face, trying to find something suspicious, but after studying me, confusion overtook her expression. You really didn't know? I kept up the act and shrugged. How would I know, Grace? We only heard whatever the matchmaker told us. Looking at her youthful face, a wave of resentment surged in my heart. In my past life I had decided to drag all of them into hell with me, but she had stolen that chance. If I could, I truly wanted to kill her with my own hands to avenge myself, but Grace was not someone who surrendered easily. She wasn't the type to endure silently like I once did. I couldn't help but look forward to the chaos. When a wicked mother-in-law and a mama's boy husband ran into someone like her, what kind of spectacle would that create? A dog biting another dog, that was always the most entertaining scene. More importantly, this life was my chance to make up for regrets. Grace's expression began to change. She even revealed a hint of pride as she said, those 3 children are from his previous wife. They may be naughty now, but they're really smart. The fortune teller said they'll grow up to hold high positions. When that time comes, I'll just sit back and enjoy the blessings. They'll take care of me when I'm old. Really? Seriously? I feigned astonishment, then sincerely congratulated her. Grace, you're truly blessed. 3 kids all at once without the pain of childbirth. She curled the corner of her lips, her eyes boring into me. Lily, you'll have children someday too, but they won't be as smart as mine. Oh right, your husband works in a coal mine, doesn't he? That job is really dangerous. If something ever happened to him one day. She abruptly stopped, pretending to look remorseful, though there wasn't a trace of guilt on her face. Sorry, you know I'm straightforward by nature. I didn't mean anything else. I just want the best for you. After saying that, she gave a faint smile and turned to leave. I watched her back as she walked away, letting out a cold laugh. In this life I wanted to see, without me tutoring them, without me supervising those 3 children every single day, they would still get into college or become officials like before. Grace thought that after being reborn everything would unfold exactly the same as it once had, but how could the tides of the world remain unchanged? And how could insignificant people like us walk the same path again? Jake returned with the items he bought. I noticed everything was for me. The clothes he wore were patched everywhere, covered in old repairs. He scratched his head in embarrassment, offering me an honest smile. I'm a man, dressing simply doesn't matter, but I know you used to live in the city. I'll try my best to give you the best life. My eyes stung for a moment, even though I had lived another lifetime. Hearing him say that still moved me. In my past life, no one had ever treated me this way. Andrew Lee looked like the perfect husband in front of others. Devoted and loving, but behind closed doors he was a coward, tied to his mother's apron strings without the slightest backbone. I steadied myself and asked, Jake, seriously, if the schools reopen someday and I give birth to a daughter, will you let her go to school? He immediately became alert, glancing around before lowering his voice. Lily, you can't say things like that casually in front of others. He held my hand and led me away from the crowd, then spoke softly, Lily, whatever you want to do, I'll support you. Hope filled my heart, so I continued, then what if the exams are reinstated someday and I want to continue my studies? As soon as I asked, my heart tightened. Ever since being reborn, this thought had flashed through my mind countless times. At first I considered going into business. When the country finally opened up, even simple trading could make money. But the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to study. In my past life, Andrew Lee's eldest son failed the exam twice. Every time he reviewed, he never studied seriously. He only cared about dating. I had to personally supervise him. Meanwhile, the twin brothers were also preparing. I was managing all 3 alone. Anyone could imagine how exhausting that was. It was those grueling years that eventually caused my severe illness. Later in this life, I would take the college entrance exam myself. I would get into a good school. Jake froze for a moment as if weighing something in his mind, but he didn't answer immediately. My heart gradually sank. I didn't blame him. Even after the country modernized, plenty of people still believed women didn't need much education. I tried to keep my tone light, not wanting him to sense my disappointment. Let's go home. In my mind, I had already begun planning. If he truly refused to let me study, then maybe I would have no choice but to consider divorce so I could pursue my own freedom. But just as I was about to turn away, he suddenly grabbed my hand, his expression incredibly serious. I agree, I'll let you study. I know you finished high school, even though it's uncertain whether the exams will be reinstated, but I'll support you, he said. I froze, feeling something inside me being touched, a small spark of hope lighting up. Then a strange question crossed my mind. Jake clearly had such progressive thinking, so why in my previous life did Grace's daughter only study up to elementary school? Could it be that everything happened because of Grace herself? Whatever the truth was, I wouldn't rush to trust anyone. Time would give the answer. After all, the scars on Grace's arms in my past life weren't fake, because I deliberately investigated. I quickly grasped the situation inside Grace's household. Her mother-in-law had set countless unreasonable rules. On top of that, the three stepchildren shunned her. Her life was nothing short of hell. Hearing this, I couldn't help feeling a bit disappointed. So Grace really was just a paper tiger, bullying the weak but cowering before the strong. But soon things changed again. I heard she had started crying to the neighbors, complaining that her mother-in-law kept all of Andrew Lee's wages, causing the three children to become so thin they were just skin and bones. She claimed that even if the old woman didn't trust her, that was fine, but she couldn't let the children suffer. I knew Andrew Lee's mother well. She wasn't someone who didn't care about her grandchildren. She only guarded against outsiders like us. She wouldn't hand out money, but she still saved good food for the three children and for Andrew. As for her clinging to the wages, there was nothing anyone could do about that, but Grace's tactic worked. The old woman couldn't endure the gossip any longer. She eventually gave in, handing over the wages, food coupons, and meat coupons to her. What was even more surprising, I even caught sight of the old woman doing housework. Truly, when facing someone tougher than herself, even a tyrant had to shrink back. Not long after Grace began to flourish. With Andrew Lee's wages in hand, she immediately had a new outfit custom made for herself. As for the three children, she didn't care about them at all. From beginning to end, Grace loved only herself. In my previous life, when Jake had his accident, he could still have been saved. But when he asked Grace for money, she didn't have a single cent saved up. Because of that, he missed the best timing to treat his injured legs. Not only that, after receiving Jake's compensation money, she spent all of it on herself. She eventually had a daughter with Jake, but she treated that girl with terrifying harshness. The result was that as soon as the girl reached working age, she ran away with a man and never returned again. It wasn't until old age that Grace began thinking about relying on her daughter. Her favorite saying back then was, "I'd rather fill my yard with roses than bow my head to grow rice." Grace, always at the center of the village gossip, recently approached me again to brag. This time she didn't hide anything and went straight to the point. "Lily, I had a dream in it. You and I switched lives." She went on and on describing her past life, but her story conveniently stopped at the part where Andrew Lee's three stepchildren graduated from college and became officials. She didn't mention at all how she pushed me off a cliff. "Lily, the dream felt so real that I decided to choose Andrew Lee. You're not mad at me, right?" I lifted my eyes from my book and smiled. "It was just a dream, Grace. You've always been the type to dream big anyway. In your dream it sounds like I lived a good life, but as you said, it was only a dream." Grace's lips curled into a mocking smirk. "But now so many details are matching up perfectly, Lily. If I hadn't married Andrew Lee, I might have believed you were actually living a happy, perfect life. But turns out there's nothing special about it at all. Look at me. I've already tamed that old woman until she's obedient. And those three kids have to butter me up before they get anything. They don't even dare talk back to me. Living the way you did, isn't that just pathetic?" I looked at her calmly. "Grace, if everything is really as you say, then in this life you'll surely live in wealth and glory." She immediately lifted her chin and nodded proudly. "Of course." Then her gaze suddenly swept over the book in my hands. In just a split second her voice shot up. "Lily, you're reading. You want to take the college exam. You remember the previous life, too, don't you?" Even after she had supposedly obtained the life she wanted, she was still obsessed with every little thing I did. I slowly closed the book and looked at her. "Grace, these are things you can only say to me. If anyone else heard you, they'd think you'd lost your mind. Didn't you already get the life you wanted? So why do you still care about me so much?" Grace stared at me intensely, our eyes locked, neither of us willing to yield. After a long moment, she suddenly laughed. "Lily, I don't care whether you remember the previous life or not, but there's one thing I'm absolutely sure of." She leaned down and whispered into my ear, her voice full of smug triumph. "In this life, I'm definitely going to live better than you. Whatever blessings you didn't get to enjoy before, I'll enjoy them for you. You don't think I'm going to just abandon those three kids, do you? Relax, I'll manage them strictly. As long as I'm here, they can still get into college just like before." Like a victor staking their claim, she lifted her head high and walked away. I reopened my book and continued reading. Those three little wolves know that entire pack of white-eyed wolves. Did she really think they would let her enjoy any good fortune? From what I knew, the only reason Grace had managed to get her hands on Andrew Lee's wages was because he'd been temporarily assigned elsewhere for a month. I waited to see whether after that month she would still be as smug as she was now. I lowered my head, recalling my previous life. When I was diagnosed with a serious illness, that entire family refused to spend a single cent to save me. The day before Grace killed me, I had already bought rat poison, planning to wait until Andrew came home home and poisoned the entire family, but at that very moment Grace invited me out. Thinking about our old friendship, I wanted someone to vent to. Along the way she kept complaining about Jake, about her ungrateful daughter, about the girl running away with a man and never coming back. When we finally stood at the edge of the cliff, she suddenly turned toward me, eyes bloodshot with hatred. Why am I prettier than you, better dressed than you? Yet you were the one who got a happy family. I refused to accept it. Then she shoved me. Just one push ended my life and left my hatred unfinished. A month passed in the blink of an eye. When Andrew Lee returned, his household instantly descended into chaos. Good news rarely spreads, but bad news travels fast. The whole village buzzed with it. You won't believe it, people said excitedly. The moment he got home, his mother started crying about everything she suffered this past month. So he grabbed a stick and beat Grace until she was sobbing and begging for mercy. That old woman had held back for a whole month waiting for this moment. She really went all out this time, but Grace wasn't the type to take things lying down. She caused an uproar and dragged the entire matter straight to Andrew Lee's unit. I heard that their family was supposed to be transferred back to the city, but because of this incident the order was put on hold. No one knew how long they'd be stuck there. I simply sat in place, took a sip of tea, and the corner of my lips curved upward. The real show was finally beginning. Someone shouted to me, "Lily, thank goodness you weren't the one who married into that family. They're impossible to live with." I smiled, but inside I already understood everything perfectly. In my previous life I had stayed in the Lee household far too long. There was no secret I hadn't uncovered. Andrew Lee only ever listened to his mother. Whenever things didn't go his way he would beat his wife. His first wife didn't die from illness. Andrew himself beat her to death. Even if a fairy descended from the heavens, his mother would still find a way to dislike her and those 3 children, despite knowing that their father and grandmother had killed their birth mother. They never once hated them for it. Thinking about it, I realized how worthless my past life had been. Ever since the Lee family failed to be transferred to the city, rumors spread non-stop. The 2 women in the house fought constantly. Every time Grace got beaten she would go to Andrew's unit and make a scene. She didn't care about reputation at all. And so day by day she scraped by in misery. As for me, Jake Miller, though not a man skilled at expressing emotions, always paid attention to my feelings. Thanks to him this life of mine was much more comfortable. During the day I didn't dare read openly, only studying by lamplight at night. Jake never once hesitated to use more lamp oil. The more time I spent with him the more I realized he wasn't anything like how Grace had described him. He wasn't weak or unstable. He was a genuinely good man. In this life I would hold tightly to my happiness. I would live well. In 1977 the college entrance exam was officially reinstated. When Jake heard the news he rushed home, his face glowing, smiling as brightly as a flower. "Honey, you were right. The college exam really is coming back. You've been preparing so long. You'll definitely pass." I smiled calmly at him, but inside I was moved to the point of trembling. In this life my dream was finally about to come true. I no longer placed my hopes on anyone else. I relied on myself. On June 4th I took the exam. The questions weren't much different from my previous life. I had prepared thoroughly with my memories. Everything felt surprisingly easy. But as soon as word spread that I was taking the exam, the entire village began gossiping. A girl studying for what all these years, and she still hasn't given Jake a child. Does she not want to live a peaceful life with him? Poor Jake, he treats her so well, gives her everything good, and now she's about to leave him. The rumors grew more and more outrageous. Every time I stepped outside cold, disapproving eyes surrounded me, as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. But a sense of unease grew inside me. My right eyelid twitched non-stop, making me restless. I waited at home until late evening, but Jake still hadn't returned. Anxiety crawled up my spine. I replayed everything in my head and then suddenly glanced at the calendar on the wall. My face drained of color. Jake. Just then a group of miners came rushing toward my house shouting, "Lily, Jake's in trouble." A deafening blast seemed to go off inside my mind. How could this still happen? I thought that in this life things would be different. I sprinted toward the coal mine. When I arrived I saw Jake, his face blackened with coal dust, his legs soaked in blood. I panicked, screaming, "Hurry, get him to the hospital." I grabbed his hand, my voice trembling. "Jake, don't be scared. We have money. We can treat this." I choked out, but he held my hand tightly and shook his head with all his strength. "That money is for you to go to school." The workers around us immediately protested. "Jake, at a time like this you're still thinking about her education. She's already that old. Why go to college now? Aren't you afraid she'll leave you?" I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay calm before shouting, "All of you be quiet." Without hesitation I rushed Jake to the hospital. Thankfully his legs could still be saved. After the surgery he clung to my hand, a tall grown man, quietly sobbing, "Lily, you shouldn't sacrifice for me like this. I know what people are saying outside, but I'm scared too. I'm not good enough. I can't protect you." I gave him a gentle smile. "Jake, sometimes we have to accept that everyone has moments of weakness, but you've already done the best you can." The day Jake was discharged my college acceptance letter arrived as well. I had actually gotten into one of the top universities universities in the country. Tears welled in my eyes. When I turned toward Jake, there was a flicker of gloom on his face before he suddenly said, "Lily, let's get a divorce. You deserve a bigger future. Go to school and live your life well." His words made tears spill down my cheeks. Immediately Jake panicked and tried to wipe them with his hand from his wheelchair, but he couldn't reach me. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice with emotion. "Jake, have I ever said I looked down on you?" He shook his head. "Then don't you ever say something like that again. For the next 2 months focus on recovering, then come to college with me." His eyes lit up though hesitation lingered. "Lily, aren't you afraid people will look down on you?" I let out a cold huff. "Respect is something you fight for yourself. I'm already past 20 and I still got into college. Once we're sitting in the same classroom we'll be equal just like everyone else." I looked at him seriously. "Jake, a person can't live without a conscience." He turned his wheelchair around his back facing me as he quietly wiped away tears. In September I took Jake with me as we left the countryside and headed to Beijing for college. On the way we passed the Lee household. Through the gate I saw Andrew Lee's 3 children surrounding Grace, complaining loudly, "You're not our real mother. Why do you get to boss us around?" Andrew's mother, after an entire year of battling wits with Grace, looked far more worn out than she had in my previous life. She stood nearby scolding furiously, "You dared hit my grandkids. Just wait till Andrew gets home. He'll teach you a lesson." Grace glared at the old woman, her voice dripping with venom. "You nasty old hag, you just want to ruin my happiness with Andrew, don't you? If it weren't for me, do you think anyone would have married your useless son? I've been tormented until I'm barely human anymore. If you dare stop me from disciplining these kids, I'll fight you to the death. Let me tell you something, these 3 children are all future talents. They must study properly and become high officials someday. Don't you dare ruin my retirement." Just as she finished yelling, her eyes landed on me. Immediately she ran over, her gaze shifting to Jake and our luggage. "Lily, you actually got into college?" I replied calmly. "Yes." Her eyes darted quickly and suddenly she gave a cold laugh, glancing at Jake. "Are you still a man? How can you let your wife go to college? Aren't you afraid she'll dump you later? You're just a what can you possibly do?" I frowned, but before I could say anything Jake shot back firmly. "My legs are almost healed. I'm not crippled, and besides, Lily is not the kind of person you're talking about. If you're so free, how about minding your own business instead of ours?" "What, she healed your legs?" Grace's voice shrilled sharply, her expression shifting. Immediately Jake looked at me with deep affection. "If Lily doesn't take care of me, who will?" All summer long I had helped him practice walking. Little by little sweat drenched the back of my shirt, yet not once did the thought of giving up cross my mind. That summer was also when he and I truly connected, our hearts growing closer, but we didn't have time to waste. I quietly pushed his wheelchair away, leaving Grace with only one sentence: "Everyone has the right to pursue happiness, but the essential condition is doing it with your own strength, not sitting around waiting for good fortune to fall from the sky." After graduating from college, I became a teacher. Jake and I built a small happy family. Occasionally, I still heard news from the Lee household. In this life, without me tutoring Andrew Lee's 3 children, they didn't even make it into vocational school, let alone university. All 3 ended up working in factories. When Grace realized none of them would ever help her rise in life, she finally decided to divorce. But how could Andrew Lee possibly agree? The 2 of them fought constantly, their arguments escalating into violent clashes. Rumor had it that during one of their fights, Andrew's mother stepped in to defend her son, but was accidentally pushed down the stairs and died. One life lost wedged between the 2 of them. In this life, none of them were destined to live peacefully again. Truly, dog eat dog is the most entertaining scene to watch. Jake and I had a daughter, and he adored her dearly. He always smiled, saying, "Girls are wonderful. She's just like her mother. She's definitely going to college someday." Time proved that he was a good man, and in this life I firmly held my happiness in my own hands.